Computer. The computer hates me. I would argue all technology hates me.
I was feeling like the paper hated me.
The paper did?
Yeah, so that's not very nice.
I'm going to take roll. I don't care what you do.
Damn, you're almost
Jordan's gone. I'm marking that out just for the heck of it. Aaron's gone. Indeed. Jaden is here. Campbell. Levi, I see you. Kayla, I see you now. Very good. All right. So, did you enjoy? Those of you who took the test, was it fun?
No.
It was so fun. Was it too? Was it? The biggest complaint I've heard, it wasn't long enough. It would have been about 2 or 3 more hours of testing. Maybe you could have got something out. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Seems fair? Yeah, it's test. Standardized test questions. Would you say it was hard? No. All right, on that happy note, we got a few things to cover. I have another change of plans. Wednesday next week, we're taking a hike.
Yes, please.
We're going to the fairgrounds.
This is true. Oh, okay. This is true.
Well, like I'm not telling you the truth.
She's my sarcasm reader.
So we're having short periods on Wednesday so we can go to the fairground and practice that much. Now we did it last year, didn't we? We walked there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was the day. Oh yeah, that day. That was a real deal. Okay. So we're doing shortened periods, and I think you're gonna go with your second period. But that means shortened periods. So my original plan for a test that day has been changed. Now we're back to the essay that day. So looks like we're doing the essay on Wednesday. Sound good? We're gonna do one of the two. I will then talk about it and give you the questions. You will come in prepared, ready to write, but it's still a test, and you'll have the 40 minutes to write. It's an essay test. Sound good? I can see from your faces you want it today, but no, we're gonna have to wait. So I'm gonna make a little bit of a change because I don't want to do a test on that day, but 40 minutes for a 5-paragraph essay that you should already be prepared for should not be that big of a deal. Rephrase that, will not be that big of a deal. In fact, you're gonna have extra time. Yes. Huh? Yeah, but always for the first one, it's a little bit. Yes. No, we'll do the test. I'm just gonna have to do the test after. Sound good? So the test, maybe do a take-home test, because we all know as you move up, the take-home test is incredibly easier because it's so much more work. Yes.
What's the essay on?
Huh?
What's the essay going to be?
Stuff.
Stuff.
Okay, so let's go and take your notes out then. Your essay is going to be 3 basic topics. Compromises around the Constitution, the divide of the political parties, which we're talking about right now, and I'm trying to decide one more. I'll give you 3 topics, you choose one. I will let you know in advance, but I'm still trying to decide the last one. Today is Thursday. I will know by Monday. Yes. For this one, I'll let you have an outline. For the first essay we write in class. Same thing, I want good essays. I want people to feel good about it. The next one, I won't have. So I'll talk about what I want for an outline, do all that on one day very quickly. All right, so let's go ahead then. Where did we get to? We got to, oh, the Inception Bill would pay off the what? Yeah, all the debt. And that means all, what do we call government debt? Bonds. Remember that term, bonds. In the United States today, it's, you remember what it is today? Yeah, treasury bills. But it's just another word for bond. Bond is the generic term. And we got that for why good credit, because the United States didn't get to this because Hamilton wanted the government to have more what? More debt. Get good credit to borrow more money, and then what would they do with that money? What's that? Construct what? Roads, bridges, and help. Yeah. Say it again. I couldn't hear you. What? Yeah, the merchants for, and what would they build? What would the merchants build? Yeah, factories and business. That's what he thought. He wanted an industrial society. But that's not it. The merchants, the speculators who would buy the bonds, what was Hamilton's plan with them? To buy the bonds, what is he buying? Loyalty. But he's also telling you Madison's idea towards that class. He sees them as loyal to only one thing, money. But at the same time, that's who Madison wanted in power. As he saw their never-ending search for more wealth, what will make the United States stronger. And do we get to, oh, how many, what were the 4 cabinet positions that Washington created? The state would be responsible for what? Foreign affairs. At least that's what it is today. Treasury. Who's Treasury? Who is Treasury Secretary? Hamilton. Who was state? And what are the other 2 departments? You don't have to worry about the names.
War and Attorney General.
Attorney General, which would be the Justice and War. Also the Post Office, and that was a department level position until the 20th century. Now it's still a constitutional duty of the United States government delivering the mail, but it's no longer considered a cabinet position. Did we get to this? Good credit. Did we get here? Here? Okay. So they would invest in manufacturing. So let's get to this. How would they pay for it? A whiskey tax. A whiskey tax, an excise tax, or an additional tax on a product is sometimes it's also called a duty. And so basically what it meant is all whiskey producers, they would have to pay an additional 10% tax. So if they sell $100 worth of whiskey, they pay a $10 tax, which of course raises the price of whiskey, makes it harder to sell. You know, there's issues with taxes. That could be good or bad, you know, depending on how you want to use tax policy. And so, payment of the debt, assume the bills, higher tariff. We'll get into the tariff in a second. And then that revenue will pay off the bonds. Well, the thing about it was, is whiskey was a big deal for frontier farmers. Out here on the frontier of the Appalachian Mountains, this area here, it's incredibly expensive to get goods to market. If there's no roads, you're nothing but wagon roads, think how expensive it would be to take a wagon full of corn. You guys sell a lot of corn to make money. But you take bushels of corn and turn that into a barrel of whiskey, you've just made value. The whiskey will sell for more than the corn. So whiskey became incredibly important for the small farmers in the West. In fact, whiskey was so valuable at the time before there was a sound financial system, it almost acted as money. People would trade whiskey or say, I owe you whiskey down the road for this. And whiskey is made, corn mash, distill it, whiskey. And a lot of sugar in corn, that's what that's it. And so this was pretty much how small farmers made a living. Don't forget, there are no roads. So it's really hard to trade unless you have a river nearby. Really hard. That's part of the reason why New Orleans was so important. And so, what was his plan? He wanted this tax to target the small farmers. Why? So they go out of business. He wanted to destroy them. And so they go into debt, they can't pay back their debt, which that should remind you somewhat of Shays' rebellion and the anger of the farmers there. But he wanted to create agricultural monopolies. So get rid of small producers and have a monopolies, kind of like what we have now. and drive them out of business. But then what's going to happen to these destitute farmers? Okay, some will labor on those big plantations now, but then what will the rest do? Yeah, exactly. They'll go to the city and work in the new factories. And they will become, destitute farmers will become cheap labor in the factories. Cheap labor in the new factories. Because all of a sudden you have a lot of poor, desperate people. What will that do to wages? Poor, desperate people drop wages for everybody, except for the very tip top. Drop wages. Why do you think the country never really does anything about undocumented people in the United States? They're desperate, and in the short run, that can drop wages. Now, if they become citizens, that actually raises wages because it increases the size of the market. And so everyone, they talk about it, they get people all fired up and nationalistic, or there's also some racial elements in there without a doubt. And then, why? Hands wages down. And so with that, by the way, what does he think then of most people who are small farmers desperately trying to make a living? What does Hamilton think of that? They're just nothing but cogs in the machine he wanted to create. He had no opinion of them all, except for the fact that they're this amorphous mob and should have no rights, and they just become workers. That's what he's thinking. And these jobs are awful. And so he's going to put them in a situation where they have no choice. So Jefferson and Madison looked at this, and they were furious. Absolutely furious. Really shocked Hamilton. He thought Madison was an ally. They saw it as rural farmers, their money will go to urban merchants. The term capitalism did not exist yet. It would have made no sense to anybody. Now, Madison and Jefferson were big plantation owners, but they don't have a lot of actual money. So what little money they have will go, and that means more debt for them. So yes, they're the big plantation owners, but now they see themselves side by side with these small Western farmers. And Jefferson would call this nothing but more money for Hamilton's mercenaries. The mercenaries were these people, the speculators who were scooping up money and only buying their loyalty through debt, which is what Hamilton actually said. He would not be as honest next time. Hamilton had goals, but he would hide his true beliefs. So would Jefferson and Madison. I know that might shock you, that politicians might actually hide what they really think. And so, as they look at it as, if the federal debt goes up, so the federal government borrows more and more money, that would mean more tax on farmers, and that would be a cycle. More tax on farmers to pay back the previous debt will lead to more debt, will lead to more taxes, and so on and so on. And what's going to happen to farmers? Farmers will become total slaves to the financial system. Slaves to finance. What's finance? Banking, a creation of companies, the buying and selling of this new entity called stocks. They'll become slaves. Now, you all should be going, no, wait a minute, isn't that rich that the slaveholders are worried about becoming slaves? Yeah, they knew. They knew. And so, they also said, this is going to create monopolies, and monopolies will crush us. Because monopolies do what? A company that has a monopoly will do what to prices of goods that people want? They'll raise them, but there's something else a monopoly will do. Let's say there's only one company now buying Jefferson's tobacco. One company. He can't go to anybody else, just one company. What happens to the price that Jefferson can charge for the tobacco? Drops dramatically. Because they're going to tell Jefferson, you take this money or take nothing. And that's what monopolies do. Why do you think there's so few factories in the United States anymore, and there's such huge supply problems right now? Because there's just a few companies, and they use a monopolistic power to drive prices down. And what happened? Companies couldn't afford to produce in the United States, so what did they produce? China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, etc. And now all the ships bringing this stuff in are waiting outside the harbor in Long Beach. Monopolies. If you're involved in ranching at all, or know someone who is involved with ranching, they're just getting hammered by meatpacking monopolies. I mean, just getting, crucible, it's unreal. Price for meat's going up really high. The money they're getting is actually dropping. It's unreal. Monopolies do that. That's what they fear. Yes, we have laws against monopoly. No, they do not enforce it. That's actually a big deal right now. Really big. We'll see where that goes. So, they said what Hamilton wants to create is a plutocracy. Remember, an oligarchy is ruled by a few. So this is a plutocracy is an oligarchy of wealthy. Just a few wealthy controlling the country. Now, when you mean wealthy, not the plantation owners. This new financial elite in cities with money. Now, there's not a lot of money, so this is like they're seeing the future. Now, that's why they oppose it. Hamilton was shocked. He thought Madison was an ally. And nobody trusted Jefferson, and because Jefferson's kind of all over the place, so he didn't consider that they would unify. And this would be the beginnings of the political parties, right here. And people around Hamilton will begin to unify. They didn't like Hamilton, but they agreed with his point of view. And those around Jefferson and Madison would start forming parties. And that would be the Federalists and the Republicans. That's coming, but not quite yet. And you notice, this is still basically an argument of the elite at first. So the law's in Congress, and Madison's doing everything he can to stop it. Hamilton, though, has a plan, a compromise. Oh, I forgot to put something up. A compromise. And though it's going to be a dinner, and this dinner will be between Hamilton, Jefferson, Adams, and Madison. Adams is the vice president. And this must have been one of the most amazing dinner parties in Philadelphia or in history of the United States. And so Hamilton knew Jefferson and Madison were scared of an urban capital. Why? That's where the financial areas would be. And so what they created was, where's the map? Give me a sec. I don't have the District of Columbia I was going to put up. I forgot to put up first period. I had it all planned out, and then instead of putting the map up, I just lost the screen. Which is my wall. And so what they decided was is a rural capital in an area where nobody existed. Or no city at all existed. Give me 1 second. Act like this is all planned. Sorry, I'm having trouble. I had this great map, and now I can't find it. There we go. Why is the computer taking so long? Okay, so they knew they wanted a rural capital, following the financial center. And so Hamilton said, hey, what if I give you a capital where you want? Where you want it? Would you be okay with that? And they agreed. And that would be the creation of the District of Columbia. And so Madison dropped his opposition, and do write this down, the Inception Bill passed. So they basically gave it up for their capital. Now, after Washington died, it would become Washington, D.C. It is still a territory of the United States. And this is a picture mocking Jefferson for making a deal with the devil to get the Assumption Bill, AKA Beelzebub. So with that, so here's the map. So right here is a river that both Jefferson and Washington were obsessed with. What part did you miss? Washington, D.C. Yeah. So after Washington died, they named it after him, but it's still the District of Columbia. And right here is the Potomac River. And Washington and Jefferson both thought the Potomac River could be a highway into the interior. That's what they both thought. Now, this was actually very unrealistic. I mean, literally just past Washington, D.C., there's a series of really big rapids. So you can't navigate. Really pretty. That Potomac Park is unreal. It's so pretty. It rains a lot. There's a canal that goes along here, though. Really good hiking tour. And what they would do is right here, this would eventually be, this square would be the District of Columbia. It would take up both Maryland and Virginia. So right there. Nothing was there. There was no town. So it would be built from scratch. And Washington, D.C. was a very rural town until the 1930s. Eventually, they would realize this is too much space, and Virginia would get this back. And so it's only this part of what used to be Maryland. But it's a territory. And if you did not know it was on the Potomac, make sure you write down it's on the Potomac. If you did not know that, or want to make sure you don't forget. But there's something else. And they're not dumb. Hamilton was clever. He knew how to manipulate Jefferson and Madison. They wanted a capital on the Potomac. They wanted a capital in Virginia. And they also knew that right about here was George Washington's plantation at Mount Vernon on the Potomac. They knew, or Hamilton knew, this is how we get Washington too. Clever, clever man. Now, they got the rural capital, but New York and Philadelphia, they were both disappointed, but New York would become the financial capital and had limited effect down the road. So let's get to almost immediately the result of this would be high taxes, farmers were furious, and that would lead to, in western Pennsylvania, the Whiskey Rebellion. Here they are tarring and feathering a tax collector. And they even talked about seceding and creating their own country called Westsylvania. I know, that would have been really cool. But it wasn't so much a rebellion like they're going to overthrow the government. They didn't want to pay these taxes. It reminded them of Shades' Rebellion, and the taxes were targeted at them. It was targeted at their destruction. But now there's a strong national government. And Washington would call out the militia of all these areas here. And here's Washington. He donned his old Revolutionary War uniform, and at least at first, Washington would lead nearly 11,000 men into western Pennsylvania to put down the militia. And Hamilton, who was overjoyed. Hamilton, that's why I call Hamilton's military, he wanted a large standing military for the government, for the United States, that didn't exist. Partially to put down rebellions as he forces people to become wage slaves. Hamilton donned his uniform and would operate as his adjutant. It's, yes, the president is commander-in-chief, but I can't even imagine the United States going to war and President Biden leading it and Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen being his adjutant leading into combat. It's just like unimaginable. No, you'd have somebody else. It's just sort of amusing. Or as any other president. Some are even more amusing in that. So with that, now Washington would realize this is a bad look, and he went back. But Hamilton stayed the whole way. There wasn't really a rebellion. When the militia arrived, they began searching people without warrants, claiming that this was a time of rebellion. It's shocking how fast they threw away the Fourth Amendment. They started arresting people without trial, throwing away the Fifth Amendment. What do you call that when you have to hold, or if somebody is arrested, they must be told what their crime they've committed and have a trial? What is that called? Well, those are rights that tell people they have these rights. Yeah.
process?
That was part of due process, yes, but there's something else. It's a Latin term, 2 terms. Habeas corpus. But Dave, those are part of your rights, and that is a part of due process. Habeas corpus. They just ignored him. It's shocking how fast that happened. The rebellion, it wasn't really a rebellion. You put down, but boy, that was a big moment. Anybody else want to protest? The army Washington led at first, I know it's all not very well trained militia, was bigger than any army he led in the Revolutionary War. Kind of amazing, isn't it? So, with that, Hamilton got his way. And a lot of people, even his allies, grew to hate him even more because of this. I know what else you're thinking, but I understand this. But what I really need is a crab-based cartoon to explain this to me. So here's Chester the Crabs, who started the Western Whiskey Rebellion, and there's a whole book of Chester the Crab cartoons of American history. Don't you feel now more secure seeing crab-based history? See, here's Crab. He's pouring whiskey. Well, actually, corn. Wow. Do you feel like you're there now? You're welcome. Maybe I'll show you more of these. And see, they're stealing our money, tarring and feathering. Hamilton and Jefferson are out of money. They leave the revolution, and the crab is happy. Yes, I'm with you. We need more crab. That should have been on the PSAT. So with that, let's get to the second big issue. Okay, the Inception Bill is big. I should have, before you write anything else down, isn't Hamilton, or wasn't he diabolical? I mean, his foresight, now it didn't work the way he thought. It did not work. He thought it'd be like in a few years. But still, what a mind. But it also shows, Hamilton and Madison saw through it. But here's where they come to their problem. The Bank of the United States. This will also be called the National Bank. And the thing is, Congress has the power to print money. Congress has the power to tax. Congress has the power to borrow. But it doesn't say how Congress will distribute this money or collect the taxes. But what's the clause that gives Congress almost unlimited power? Yes, necessary and proper. So what Hamilton said was, this is an implied power under the necessary and proper clause, that we can build a bank to do all of these functions. And he thought he had an ally in Madison, because Madison wrote the necessary and proper clause. So Hamilton said this. And what we're going to do is create this bank. And sometimes you see it called National Bank, or I sometimes abbreviate as the BUS. The BUS. So what would be is charter for the first corporation. Now we'll talk more about what a corporation is, but a corporation is a company made up of investors who buy stock. Remember a joint stock company? This is going to be a private company, but they'll get a contract, a charter that will lay out exactly what they can do, which is all what contracts or corporations are today. They get a contract or they get a charter. They're very open now, but back then they must do these things. Now, the people who invest in it will make money, but they must do these things. That is the law. Contracts are protected by law or enforced by law. And the U.S. will give it $2 million. Remember the tax on farmers? That's where the money will come from. Seed money. So the U.S. government's giving them money. This is a pretty common practice. The United States using taxpayer money to help business. To this day, there's a bill right now to put in millions, if not billions of dollars to give to companies in the United States to try to encourage them to make semiconductors right now. There's a massive semiconductor shortage. We don't make it. And so that's why car prices are blowing up and used car prices are blowing up. Yeah. There's a lot of consequences for our trade policy in the last 30 years. It's all happening right now. Enjoy buying stuff for Christmas. So with that, and then they can sell, according to the charter, up to $10 million in stock in the company. They would buy this to sell this to investors. Why would an investor buy a stock in the Bank of the United States? Because they want to do what? Make, huh? Not even that, even they just hold on to the stock. But that could be one reason. Another reason, hold on to the stock and they'll do what? If you own a piece of company and the company makes money, what do? You make money. It's called a dividend. We'll come back to that. They want to make money. So it could be speculation, but they want to make money. So Hamilton is thinking, we will take advantage of the urges of the merchant class. The very same people that were, he bought the bonds back at 100%. They have this extra money, they'll buy the stock and build this bank. What will the bank do then? Key functions. They'll collect taxes. And they will issue the currency. Here is a banknote from the first bus. And they'll loan money like a bank. And they'll put all kinds of strings attached to the loans, thus tying it back to this charter, therefore creating a national financial system. There were no banks in the United States. If you want to borrow money from a bank, if you're in the United States in 1790, you want to borrow money from a bank, you had to go to the Bank of Amsterdam in the Netherlands or the Bank of London. By the way, this is almost a direct copy of the Bank of London, which was almost a direct copy of the Bank of Amsterdam. We get a lot of financial stuff from the Dutch. And so, issue currency, so they can control the money supply. So the director of the Bank of the United States could print more money, pull back money, and then they would loan money for this purpose, two of them. To build more banks, to build a banking system tied to this Bank of the United States, and then promote industry. Either they would loan directly for industry or have banks that would be able to loan money to buy machines, aka capital. And so that's the creation of it. And we know the money will be worth something because there's tax revenues coming in. Because there's tax revenues coming in, we guarantee we're backing up that money. There's got to be taxes or money is meaningless. Same thing, that's why people who all talk about cryptocurrency being good don't understand that cryptocurrency has value because it's valuable in currency created by states that collect taxes. So it's basically, yes. Does anyone have a dollar bill? Can I borrow $1 from somebody? Ooh, here's $1. Okay, anybody else? See, this is how the banking system. So you look at this. On top it says Federal Reserve note. And that is the national bank of today. So they issue today. So have you ever seen that? Federal Reserve note. That is what we call our national bank, created in 1913. What's this worth here? $1. Very good. Thank you. So, too many witnesses.
I know.
So with that, how did Jefferson and Madison react? They saw it immediately for what it was. A system to not only promote debt for more speculators, but this will help the merchant class. This will help the merchant class. How? Those very shareholders, I'll get to why I put problem here in a sec. Those shareholders. How do banks make money? Banks make money in two ways. First off, how do they charge for loans? What do we call that? Interest. So they can jack up interest, get more money. But there's something else. Do you remember inflation or deflation? Does inflation, or sorry, which one helps the banker, aka creditor? Inflation or deflation? So couldn't they create deflation to make money? Couldn't they manipulate the money supply for their own personal gain? Yet that's the money supply in the financial system for the entire country. Couldn't they do that like a bunch of mercenaries? So that's what they were fearful of, that they would manipulate the market for their own personal gain. Oh, sure, the charter says they won't do it, but come on, who's paying attention, right? And who pays attention to the financial reserve today? Besides out there, I mean, we all do, right? No, we have a lot of stuff going on to try to pay attention. Now, they're not private in the same way, so it's a different system. There's a problem with this, the Jefferson's argument. Jefferson and Madison. It's twofold. First off, they both kind of knew we needed a bank. Maybe they didn't want the bank in this way, but we need a sound financial system. They knew that. But they didn't want Hamilton's system. And the other problem is this, and it's even bigger. Madison wrote this. He talked about this. That made him look pretty hypocritical. Also at the same time. Who else thought that these merchant classes were a bunch of mercenaries? Who else thought that? Hamilton. He knew it. He knew he was potentially creating a situation that they could manipulate the money supply, put most of the population in more debt as they get rich. He already knew the only way to buy their loyalty was money. Did Hamilton say that? He didn't tell anybody that. He kept that secret. Jefferson and Madison had to hide the fact that, yeah, we kind of need a bank. So what did they say? This is where Madison punched Hamilton in the gut. It's not listed as one of the enumerated powers, and therefore there can be no bank. Well, wait! Madison wrote the thing. He wrote it. And now he's saying, yeah, I wrote it, but it didn't mean anything. Hamilton was just shocked by this. How dare you do this to me? It's actually really kind of amusing. By the way, from then on, a great way to try to attack a bill or a program that you don't want, it's not constitutional. And people will use it to this day. Now, it doesn't mean they're lying, but anyone who, if you ever hear a politician who will say this violates the Constitution, be very skeptical of their motivations. Be very skeptical. They're probably hiding another reason. Now, you might agree with them or disagree, but be skeptical. That's a good hint. This might shock you, I actually don't trust most of them. Even the ones I like, I don't necessarily trust. Guys, there's a lot of stuff goes on. It's healthy. So what happened? George Washington, his influence would decide. He kind of agreed with both. Yeah, Hamilton won the day. Hamilton won the day. Washington agreed to it if they put a 20-year limit. So 20 years, it's 1812, they'll have to recharter the bank. 20-year limit. It's one of those, let's see if it works. By the way, who will be president in 20 years? Madison. One of those strange little quirks of history. So that's the Bank of the United States. So if you go to the White House, this is a picture of the Bank of the U.S. The first one is across the street from the White House. Now it's a private bank. It's the First National Bank. But it's this really ornate building. You're thinking, that's a private bank? Well, it used to be the National Bank. 3. Now we'll do this one quick. A protective tariff. You know, I did the big one, smaller. This one's a lot smaller. So a protective tariff is this. Hamilton said in his report on manufacturers, we need a high protective tariff. A tax on imports to encourage U.S. manufacturing. If you put a really high tax on British goods, like iron goods, that people want, you put this high tax on them, that will encourage American production. That will encourage American merchants to say, hey, we can make money with iron. I'm just giving iron as a good example. Let's invest in factories. So this high protective tariff will raise prices, but the idea is that will encourage American manufacturing. I think I put that down. So prices up on imports, encourage domestic production. The problem is, if all prices go up, most of the country's farmers, they don't have a lot of money. One of those farmers was Washington. And Washington, this time, didn't agree with Hamilton. This did not pass. But there'll be a debate over this for all the way through today about domestic industry and tariffs. Part of the reason why there's so many problems at this moment. Here's an old thing about encouraging trade and its success. Okay, I just enjoyed it. One of the last things we'll see of the old app. By the way, what do we call this plate? What's it made of? Porcelain goods from China would like to sign that you really made it in Britain or Britain, the United States. Like I'm middle class, or I'm a merchant. I have porcelain, and so much of it came from China. They started calling it China. That was a symbol of making it, and that's where that comes from. So what passed? A very tiny tariff on revenues. They called a very tiny tariff on imports called a revenue tariff. It wasn't a big enough tax to try to encourage American production. But in 20 years, there'll be a big increase on the tariff. And there'll be a big fight between those who want protecting tariffs and those who want no tariffs, AKA free trade. We're coming to that. It's still a fight today. I have no easy answer for that. We'll explain some of it down the road. Success to trade. So, the last big issue that would divide the first political parties and also make this would be a great essay question is things. Happy now? Thank you for asking. I am going to decide one more. The compromises in this might be enough. Would you rather have 3 choices or 2? How about 7? Sometimes it's nice having more choices. Sometimes limited choices just make you pick one and go. I lean both ways. I've been in that boat. I know what you're thinking. That was long before there was paper, but yes. So the French Revolution was going on. And to the American point of view, it was basically a battle between the British and the French. Thus the Anglo-French War. Anglo-Saxons were one of the first Germanic people that settled Britain. And so the Angles and the Saxons, therefore Anglo-Saxons sometimes refers to it as England. So that's right. England, that's where it comes from. Hamilton, even though he fought against the British, admired the British. He despised the ideas of the French Revolution. Equality, constitutionalism, rights for people. I know, isn't that kind of Hamilton's an interesting guy. He supported the British. Jefferson supported the French for lots of reasons. First off, what battle during the Revolutionary War led to the Anglo-French alliance? We had an alliance with France. What battle brought the French into the war and allowed the United States to win? Yeah, Saratoga. They're our ally, even though the king who did that will be beheaded in 1791. Which, by the way, that's why the wars began. When the French, a lot of the monarchies around Europe were very wary of the French Revolution, scared. And then when they beheaded the king, the Emperor of Austria or the King of Britain started going, that could be my head. So they all attacked France. And France did really well. By the way, here it's a storming of the Bastille in the fortification in France that would signify the French Revolution. I actually have a good story about that. Maybe someday I'll tell you. We're not ready. And this is France actually did really well when everyone attacked it. Really well. That's why today everyone in the world copies the French military. They all copy what the French military does, how they do, everything. And it's from the wars in this era. And so, Jefferson, but there's also one more thing Jefferson supported. Almost forgot. The Declaration of Independence encouraged the revolt. To Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence, that's my baby. This is my revolt. So even when the French Revolution devolved into the terror and the beheading of thousands, Jefferson still supported it because he had a very idealized version of it. I have somewhere, and I can't find it, my Marie Antoinette doll, that the head popped off. Marie Antoinette was the Queen of France. But I can't find it. The head doesn't stay out anymore. You used to be able to shoot the head at people and go about 6-7 feet. So I broke it. So, controversy hit right away. When a leading French revolutionary, who in American history will always be known as Citizen Genet, they got rid of formal titles and everybody was equal, thus citizen. When the Soviet Union was created, everybody was comrade. We're all equal, no titles. Genet came over and tried to encourage the United States to join the war. And to the Washington's government, who was relatively pro-British, they were furious about this and they would dub him a dangerous alien. What is an alien in this context? Yes.
Someone's not a citizen.
Yes, somebody who's not a citizen of the United States. Now, the idea of somehow controlling your borders or stopping people going in and out was unheard of. Immigrants just came in, lived there for a certain number of years, and became a member of the country. So that's a relatively new thing. But he was a dangerous alien. He was probably not from another world. Or at least that's what they want us to think, right? What did they know? Okay, moving on. Now, he'd eventually be deported from the country. But this really terrified the Washington administration. They did not want war. But U.S. ships were being hit. Merchant ships were being stopped by both the British and French. They called it a commercial war, but they were trying to stop trade into their enemies' countries. Trade. And Washington now is getting calls from U.S. merchants saying, do something. Now, Washington knows we can't do anything. We're weak and don't have an army. So, the United States would declare that this valley was beautiful. Had nothing to do with the war. Okay, we're back. Neutrality. Here's the neutrality note. But, for the next 20 years, U.S. ships are going to be stopped by French pirates called corsairs, privateers working for the French government, or stopped by the British blockade. This is a picture of the blockade. I'll talk more about that later. And so U.S. merchant ships are being hit. And that includes people who might want to trade their tobacco to France. Also, while this is going on, Britain had never officially left here. The claim was given to the United States in what's the treaty that ended the Revolutionary War? Treaty of Paris of 1783. But the British said, we're not leaving because we might have given you our claim, but we accept the claim of the people who actually live here, and they want us here. So the British were staying in Fort Detroit because the various tribes here wanted the British there, which is true. So there's another reason to be mad at the British along the frontier, and that is going to lead to a series of wars we'll talk about here and a little bit later. These Northwest, they'll be dubbed in history as the Northwest Indian Wars. It's a little more complex than that. But what we have here is the desire for all this land. Remember, Washington went on the national stage for the first time back in 1754 because of land here. He was a speculator. There's all these speculators who want that land and kick the people who live there off and steal their land. By the way, they all knew it. That's what the term settler is. Settler means coming in and taking that land. They're very proud of that fact. We have different definitions now, but the various tribes here formed a confederacy led by the Shawnee and the Miami tribe. Powerful fighters, and they're going to hold this land. As they see it, they're going to try to hold everything north of the Ohio. There's a bunch of settlers here. The British, even though technically staying neutral, were helping them. They were helping. So with that, in 1791, General Robert St. Clair will lead a force up there to try to defeat this confederacy. And right here, in the western edge of present-day Ohio, they were destroyed. Sometimes it's called the Battle of the Wabash, but in history, this has always been known as St. Clair's defeat. The worst defeat ever by a United States military force in its history. A U.S. Army force, even though it's militia force. Worst defeat ever. Washington was humiliated, but he and Hamilton got what they wanted, the creation of a standing army. The militia would now become much more secondary. And that standing army would take a couple years to make. Let's get this for the bell rings. And they would defeat that Confederacy at the Battle of Fallen Timbers for lots of reasons. Partially because the British just abandoned them. The British did not want war with the United States because they were fighting the French. And so the Confederacy would be decimated. Fallen Timbers right here in northwestern Ohio. And at the Treaty of Greenville, named after Nathaniel Greene, the fighting Quaker, the United States got all this area, and I'd say that's yellow. Want to go with yellow with me on that? Yellow. They got that land from the Confederacy. But all of this land went to the various tribes, for the most part, for how long? The treaty said forever. How long did forever last? Yeah, the United States broke that treaty in virtually seconds. We're leading up to another war. Big war. Okay, so on that happy note, I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow.